Hi everyone, welcome to Christmas. You can officially start talking about Christmas with no shame once it's December, don't you reckon? Today I want to share with you a fabulous Christmas kombucha recipe which I totally just made up. Like, pulled it out of the bag, and it's delicious and it makes great Christmas presents or contributions to any kind of Christmas or festive feast. I'll be talking about how I make our continuous brew kombucha. You don't have to be a legend to do this. I'm not a legend. I'm like the world's worst housekeeper, but even I can keep on top of continuous brew kombucha. And right at the very end, I'm gonna share a delicacy that me and Juno just made up yesterday that blew our minds. It's kombucha plus one other ingredient, and it's freaking next level. Before we crack completely on, I just wanted to point you in the direction of Channel Mum's alternative advent calendars. Here in our little home, try really hard to build in like the values that we really believe Christmas is about. This year, my mum gave the girls a fair trade chocolate advent calendar, which I think is the business. But in the last 2 years, we have done a kindness calendar and a reverse calendar, which is where you give like an item to a food bank for every day of Advent. And I just love those ideas, and you can find out more about them on the Channel Mum link below. I've got all my paraphernalia. I feel a little bit like, what's her name? Martha. Is that her name? Martha Graham? I think she went to prison. I don't know. I get my people mixed up. She might have gone to prison. Or she might just be a really great crafty Christmas lady. I don't know. Now, I tend to make kombucha on a Monday and then one other random day of the week. I make it a couple of times a week because we go through kombucha like nobody's business. We love it. We are kombucha fiends. It's really cool because it's the only probiotic thing that my children regularly eat, like take in. So they do kind of like the sauerkraut that I make, and they do kind of like probiotic yogurt, but it's a bit random, whereas kombucha, we have it every single day with our dinner so that it doesn't wreck our teeth. Our dentist told us that. In fact, she advised us to drink more kombucha because it's so good for oral health. Yeah, so maybe I do feel like slightly smug that my kids love this probiotic thing because it's so good for them. I just know that it's replenishing their gut flora, it's stopping them from being sick, it's boosting their immune system. Whoop whoop. The thing I love the most about making kombucha is that for a bottle like this, you'd pay like $30 for that. You would pay $30 for that, and I reckon I make it for about $1. I got these super cool bottles from a charity shop, an op shop, or a secondhand store as well, and they're just so great. I got loads of them. Tim was like, what are they? But I use them all the time. So I always start by pouring hot water into my bottle to kind of sterilize it a little bit. Other people would boil their bottles, but I don't do that. I think we just go through our kombucha on a monthly basis, so it's never really hanging around for months and months, so don't have to worry about the bottles being completely and utterly sterile. I get them as hot as I can, then I leave them to cool, and then it's possible you're thinking, why is she filling up the bottles first and not actually showing us how to make the kombucha tea? That's because unless I fill these bottles up, my container's gonna be just full of the old kombucha. So I kind of need to empty it by filling up my bottles first before I make the other tea and pour it in. So now we've got 3 bottles of kombucha that have just finished their first ferment in this big container and are just about to go into a second ferment. They usually spend between 2 and 6 days in here just doing its fermenty thing. And then they spend up to 1 to 4 weeks in this second bottle. And that's where the good stuff really happens, I reckon. If you take it just straight from here, after just 1 ferment, it's kind of yum, it's pretty good. But once it's been in a bottle with a few secret ingredients, it is the business. The business. And you can add all sorts of cool flavors, which is what we're gonna do in a second. Before we move on to the actual Christmas feel, I'm just gonna show you what I do to make kombucha tea to begin with. Martha Stewart, that's who I'm thinking of. I feel like Martha Stewart today. So, one thing a lot of people don't know about starting their own kombucha is that you actually don't need a Scoby. A Scoby will form it will just be a little bit slower. You could go online, or you might have a friend with kombucha and you can get a Scoby and a little bit of starter tea to get your own brew going. If you don't know anyone and don't really want to get a starter off the internet, you can literally buy a bottle of fresh kombucha, as long as it's in the refrigerated section in a supermarket. You can buy that and you can start your own kombucha from there, even though it doesn't have a Scoby. Once you start adding tea and sugar to it, you'll get your own kombucha going, which is really cool. However, the benefit of having a Scoby, a few people don't know this either, is that the Scoby is the thing that makes your kombucha real fizzy. So for a few weeks, the first month or so of starting kombucha, your tea probably won't be really super fizzy, but then when it gets a thicker Scoby and the Scoby goes right to the sides of your vessel, it traps in all the goodies like the yeast and the stuff, carbonatory stuff, that makes your tea go really fizzy. So yeah, a little bit of a trick there. So once you've got your little starter cup of tea, either from a bottle from the supermarket or from a friend, what do? Well, you start by making your tea. So you add boiling water, then you add sugar, and you stir it all around so the sugar melts, and you add your tea bags. I always add green tea and berry tea because it gives it a lovely little flavour. I let them steep for about 30 minutes, and then I take the tea bags out, I let it cool, and then I add it into my vessel that's already got tea in it. If you're starting from scratch, you'll need at least 1 cup of starter tea to go into this vessel or into a jar. The funny thing is, I never used to do continuous brew kombucha. I just used to like decant it from jar to jar in small little jars. And then somebody was like, you should do continuous brew. And I was like, maybe I should, because it involves less cleaning of jars. But I didn't have the equipment. And then the next day, I'm not even kidding, the next day, I went into a secondhand store and thus, this little gadget thing with one of these taps. So now I basically never wash this, like maybe I wash this once every 6 months, and then once or twice a week I just tap off, put it in bottles, and then pour this into that. And honestly, it's been the best thing ever. So keep your eyes peeled in a secondhand store for one of these vessels with a tap. Such a winner. Now I've taken out the tea bags and I've left it to cool, and I'm gonna pour this in. This is my delicious thick Scoby. Look at that. All of this brown stuff is yeast. It's what makes it really fizzy. And this beautiful, some people call this the mushroom. And then I cover it up. And just leave it for, yeah, until I kind of next get around to it. So it might be like 2 days, or it might be a whole week. It might even be 2 weeks actually, but then it does go a little bit vinegary. Now back to these little bottles again. So do you remember I simply took 3 bottles out of my big vessel before I poured a fresh batch of tea into it. And it usually, ordinarily, it's so much flavour simply with the green tea and the berry tea that I don't do anything apart from adding 1/4 teaspoon of sugar to it. Some people might use half a strawberry, some people might use like half a date. But when you're capping this off for its second ferment, you do need to put something sugary in there because that's what makes it go real fizzy. But to make a Christmas flavour, you do the usual 1/4 teaspoon in there. And then, da-da-da, you take 1/4 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, a fingernail of fresh ginger, you take half a clove and half a star anise, secret festive ingredients, and then you just pop that in. So you don't want this to be like overloaded with Christmas flavour, right? You just want a little kind of warming hint, a hint of Christmas. That's what we're going for. And then you just cap it off, give it a wee little shake, and then you leave it for at least 1 week and more like 2 or 3 weeks. If you do this now, it's gonna be like perfect for Christmas presents and perfect for festive banquets. Now I'm gonna show you one of our favorite little treats when it comes to kombucha. I don't know if this exists. I think I might have made this up too, me and Juno. You take your kombucha. Wow, yeah, so fizzy. Then you put it in a glass. Fizziest kombucha ever. And then you take ice cream and you put just a little spoon full of vanilla ice cream in your kombucha. And it's a Booch float. Is that what you call them in your country? I think that's what they're called here. In England, I think we might call them spiders. Usually made with Coke, which is toxic and delicious and very toxic. But this one, it's like a probiotic, fizzy delight. So you can make these for all the kids and then you can put gin in yours and everybody is happy. I can't tell you how good this is. This is like, so good. If you've got any questions about continuous brew, kombucha, or Christmas, ask them in the comments. I'd love to hear what you're doing over the coming holidays. Stay radical, my beautiful friends. Remember, if you want more of me, you can check out my Patreon. I just released for $5 plus patrons a whole creative journal to help women fall in love with their menstrual cycle, to find the bliss in their menstrual cycle rather than the pain. I think you're gonna love it. So if you want your free copy of that, you can head over to Patreon and become a $5 patron today. Much love to you. Thank you for watching. Stay radical. Mwah.